Okay. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. Today we're going to be talking about auto layout plugins. Thank you. And yeah, talk through auto layout first. But so moving around here. Really quickly, here's the attendance link. As always, put this up for another 10 seconds. Type it in. Great. Here's the slide link. And yeah, let's just dive in today. So what is auto layout? Auto layout will let you create dynamic frames that respond to their content. It's a property you can add to frames and components and will let you create designs that can grow or shrink as their content changes. And this is great when you're adding like new layers, accommodating like longer text, or maintaining alignment as your designs evolved. And what can we do with it? Create buttons and cards that automatically resize with their text. We can create menus and lists that can be reordered. And we can combine responsive components to create full screens that sort of behave similar to maybe a mobile to desktop interaction. So here on the right is an example of a Twitter feed with a smaller width and a larger width. And this is maybe something that we'll design for when we think of like responsive applications. So getting started, you can add auto layout to any frame or a selection of objects. And this can include components, groups, other selections, and layers. So you can add auto layout to a selected frame by clicking the plus button in the right sidebar. And that will add auto layout. Or my favorite is just pressing Shift A on what is selected. But of course, you can always right click, add auto layout. So let's talk about it. What you can do is you can set the direction of auto layout. So you can choose to have a vertical flow, which will align elements on the y-axis. You can see here how when you add this button group in, it is appended to the bottom of this card. So this card can be, thought of as like a vertical auto layout frame. But then you'll notice that when a button is added, it is immediately to the right of the other buttons. This is a subframe that has a horizontal axis. So these buttons are going to be along the x-axis. So in this example, combines the two to make a really good design. You can also adjust the spacing between elements. This is either the horizontal and vertical spacing, depending on which direction your frame is going. So I'll let this example play another time. It does a great job illustrating this effect. Awesome. You can also change the padding around the object. You can see here how this button has an X padding and a Y padding, and you're allowed to change that. You can set it uniformly, or you can change each side individually. So you can set a single value in the field to set equal padding on all sides, or a comma-separated values to set each side. And to select unique padding for each side, open the alignment and distribution settings. Welcome in. So we also have alignment, where we get to choose how child objects align within the auto layout frame. So this is an interactive grid. You can see you can click around in it, and it has 9 options for how the children will reside in the frame. So you can see how there's a center, justify left, justify right, justify top, sort of functionality that will put the elements on all corners of the frame. Wrap is a really cool property. It gives you the ability to let elements expand over a single row. So instead of making multiple rows and having them all be like horizontally auto laid out, you can just have one row that will wrap. And this will push elements that overflow into the next row. Distribution determines how objects will be spread or packed within the within the auto layout frame. So packing objects will be grouping them together. And you can use this to keep objects as close to each other as possible. And spacing between will let you equally distribute spacing along all the objects. This can be used to stretch them. You can see in this example, the second frame here is used to push the subsections all the way to the right of the frame to create probably what most of us are familiar with in web design. Autolayout also supports resizing. This will determine how parent frames adapt to changes in their child elements. So resizing settings can be applied on both the horizontal and the vertical axes. So you can see here, hugging content will let the frame resize itself based on its child element. Fixed width or height will keep the frame dimensions the same, regardless of the content. And you can set the child objects to fill container. And this will make them stretch to fill the dimensions of their parent container. Constraints in the auto layout will determine the behavior of the child objects in relation to the parent frame. So like resizing, constraint settings can be on, again, either axes individually. And so you can specify the left, right, top, or bottom, and so let the child object stick to that place and specify direction. You can also say left and right, top and bottom, which will keep the margins the same. You can also center them, you can also scale them. Min and max constraints will ensure that your content won't compromise when adjusting your content size. So in responsive design, right, the width and height of the viewport will be constantly changing. So making sure your content stays the same might help the flow of your design. So in this example, if you shrink a desktop view to mobile, you want the element to shrink without distorting the corresponding design. And again, bringing back to this first example here, you can nest auto layout frames within each other, which is a really strong property of Figma. And when you nest an auto layout frame, the nested frame will have both the parent and the child properties. So you can do this in a few ways, dragging it into an existing auto layout frame or creating a new auto layout frame around a selection. And you can see that here. Or in this example, first we create a button, and this is going to be in the horizontal axis. This will allow the button itself to grow and shrink as we add like different sizes and lengths of text. And then we sort of add this row of buttons. And this will combine all our buttons into one row along the horizontal axes. And finally, we can bring in the post. And the post is going to live on top of the buttons. So that's our vertical auto layout frame. And again, we can have finally the parent frame, which is a list of posts along the vertical axis. Any questions? Great. Okay, let's jump into it. So hopefully we have copied the lecture slides, copied the file, and we're ready to follow along. I'm going to give everyone one more minute to get here, copy the file for them. Yeah. Oh. Can I get a show of hands who has successfully cloned this? Great, great, great. Okay, follow along with me. So we're going to be creating our first responsive button. So let's first drop some text onto the page. It's going to be my button. Okay. Does anyone remember how we like convert this into an auto layout frame? Oh. Get out of here. Get out of here. Well, hopefully we've tried to right-click this frame, or excuse me, right-click our text and find that we can add auto layout from there. Or again, Shift A, boom. We'll convert this to an auto layout frame. I'm gonna rename this my button. Now I have a button. Well, not a button yet. Let's make this look a little better. I'm gonna add a fill property, and I'm just gonna grab this color right here. It's a little better. My text. It's all right for now. I'm going to add a stroke, and I want this to be outside, maybe 3's good as a stroke weight. And then from there, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna round the corners. I think 50 is okay. In my auto layout, I'm gonna adjust the padding just a little bit for the horizontal. And finally, oh, that's too much on the vertical. But here it is. There's your button. How do we do? Do you want me to go back at any point? Okay. So hopefully you all have this. Now from here, we can quickly see that by duplicating this, you'll have your button number 2. Oh, and apparently number 3. But now you can add text here. And it will sort of shrink and expand to fit whatever you want to put in here. Thank you. So someone's laughing. Yeah, but this is really powerful, right? Because your button's gonna be, anything can go in here. You can even like drag icons in here, right? We saw that a bit in components lecture. But now, let's see really quickly how we can attempt to like put buttons on, say, a page, right? So here's a buttons in a frame. What would that look like? Let's really quickly drag a frame. There's our frame. And let's put our buttons here. Oh, I did not grab my buttons. So now my buttons are on this frame. Well, what do we want? We want our frame to also be auto layout, right? So I'm going to again press Shift A for my frame. You can see here how it automatically inferred the auto layout from where my buttons were placed. So you can see a wrap was inferred because my buttons were differed on both the horizontal and vertical axes. So Figma just decided to wrap it. But I don't actually like that. I want this to be only horizontal. Okay, so now my buttons are along the horizontal axis, right? But there's a problem that they're now coming off the page. That's an issue. So what did we learn? We learned that we don't want, well, in this case, we don't want this parent frame to have a fixed width. We want it to hug the content. So that's great. So now that this is hugging the content on its horizontal axes, we can drag even more buttons into this, and Figma will just expand the frame for all of our buttons that we put in here. So that's great. But, you know, again, our device screen, unfortunately, fixed width. So, you know, adding infinite amount of buttons, eventually we're going to run out of room on the screen, right? Computers don't go that wide. So let's go back to this fixed width idea. Drag it down here. And again, let's go back to wrap. So wrap's really powerful because Figma will know to infer that anything we place in here should be, added to this horizontal axis. It's still going along the x-axis, but it will create a second row when the elements overflow on the container. So we can also mess around a little bit more with the spacing between elements. So this is a pretty cool effect. You'll notice parent is unchanged. Again, we set it to be fixed on its width, but interesting that its height is expanding, right? Because our parent is still hugging the elements, hugging its child elements along the y-axis. So changing the spacing between elements is kind of goofy because both the horizontal padding and the vertical padding change. So I don't really like that. I might want horizontal padding, but the vertical padding doesn't need to be that high in my opinion. So again, I can adjust it individually right here. Okay, hopefully this is making sense. Any questions so far? I'm messing around with our buttons on a frame. Great. Okay, let's dive into some UI stuff. So here we have probably just a typical blog post with our dog. So I'm gonna give everyone 2 minutes, really quickly. Let's try to make this frame, recreate it using Autolayout. And we have all the stuff we need for it right here. But using Autolayout, imagine how this parent frame needs to display its child elements. Come back in 2 minutes. If you're stuck, call me over. Yeah, right there. Pro, Autolayout, Phenom. Give everyone 60 seconds here. Very much so. Yeah. All right, show of hands. Who's still working? That's great. Let's go over this. So I'm sure you all knocked it out of the park. But just because I'm going to go ahead and stumble around and try to recreate this in Autolayout. So what I'm going to do, select all my stuff, hold Option, drag it over here, make a copy. I'm going to get to work. So I know this is going to be my parent frame. So I think that it's going to be auto layout. So I'm just going to make it to be auto layout. Right now, definitely want it to be hugging my child elements. There's a pretty uniform padding around it. I think that's good. So I'm going to just drag my element in right there. Oh, that looks wonderful. Going back to my parent frame. If I add my text in here. Oh, awesome. And wow, okay, that was really painless. So hopefully we enjoyed that, because we're going to expand on this idea and recreate sort of a dog feed like you'd see on a social media app. So I'm just going to go over this really quickly. What do we do? Well, let's create our frame. It's going to be dog feed with 3 E's. And then it's also going to be auto layout frame. And from here, I'm just gonna try to click and drag. That didn't really work, did it? So I dragged everything in here. And all of these elements sort of got smushed by the auto layout frame, which is fine. This is not bad, but gotta change this. So parent cannot hug the child elements. Unfortunately, not in this case. So let's sort of create our desktop width and height, just some rectangle. And we know our content needs to wrap, right? We have 2 horizontal rows. So let's have it be wrapped. It's already looking so great. We can adjust the spacing between elements like so. I'm going to adjust the padding on both sides. I'm going to click and drag. Well, just click here because I want my elements to be aligned in the center. And then finally, honestly, this is great. I'm just going to change the fill color to be red. Wow. Look at that. So great. So easy. That was auto layout. So going forward, hopefully you incorporate this in your own labs and in your final project, because it really is just such a strong tool to use. So thank you. I'm going to pass the rest.
I hope you guys learned something good about auto layout. It's very useful if you know how to use it correctly. And it can take some time to learn, I think, because it's kind of like a strange concept and there's a lot of different elements, but it's useful in the long run. But yeah, we're gonna dive into content-driven design, aka death to lorem ipsum. If you know, you know. But yeah, so why is content-driven this? One second. Okay, so what is content-driven design? This is basically focusing on like the actual content throughout your design process to like make better decisions for your design in the long run. And content includes a variety of media that ranges from like text, photos, videos, charts, tables, lists, etc. And this is all about like knowing the purpose of your design that you're making and how you're going to achieve that purpose before you even start designing anything. So why is it important? Imagine you're building a house, and using placeholder content in your design is like telling the architect for the house, like, oh, just build the framework and then we'll just figure out the inside details later. And obviously that's not a very good plan to build a house, because, what are you going to actually put in the house? And that kind of, the structure of your house depends on what is going to be inside of it. just like our design, we kind of want to emulate that theme and like really know what you're going to make this for before you design like the aesthetics and everything about that. Yeah, like when you worry about what a website should look like first and foremost, and then you just like jam placeholder text like lorem ipsum, it just you don't really know how the flow is actually going to be, and that's just like the house, you don't know where the rooms are going to be, what appliances are going to be there, stuff like that. So yeah, design should mold to the content, not the other way around. Oftentimes designers like lorem ipsum is basically just like a long string of text. I think it's like Latin or something, but it's just like designers use it a lot to just put it in, they're like, oh, text is going to be here, but you don't know what kind of text it's going to be. So yeah, basing designs on content instead of handling edge cases after the fact forces you to think deeper about designing for different sizes, restrictions, and different use cases. And by prioritizing these considerations early in the design process, you can avoid endless rounds of iteration to handle these edge cases. It's also like if you're developing an app and you're designing it, it saves a lot more money to just fix everything on the first try rather than having to like send multiple versions to developers and stuff like that. So this is a bad example of content-driven design. You'll see like in this picture of this like it's like a planner app, I think. I don't really know exactly what they're, tracking and stuff like that. Like at the top, you'll see like these profiles with names. And like this design only accounts for like short Anglo-Saxon names. So like names from other cultures are really long, and like using this design can't really accommodate for that. And then also like these graphs and charts are ambiguous. Like what kind of data is this really reflecting? It just says like analytics, like what kind of analytics? And these placeholder like grading images, they don't really indicate like what that's actually going to be for and like the function of the app itself. So how does content-driven design work? Good content is based on your users and their motivations. So this really stems from like understanding the user's needs, which is crucial to understand the journey that they go through using the design. And there are several UX research tools that can also help inform content-driven designs. So when you start a project, you can consider these kinds of questions like, what are you trying to communicate to your audience? What has the user seen before they get to your content? And what is the user looking for? How can your design, efficiently help them find what they need? So one method is card sorting. So you basically give participants a deck of cards with like different words on them. Like this is like a lot of school related words like tuition, academics, scholarships, how to apply. And then you have them rank the words that make sense to them, like in a hierarchy. So after the sorted words or cards, you'll see like academics, and then under that is like majors and minors, course schedule, then tuition, which is related to like financial assistance and scholarships, and then admissions, how to apply, campus visit. So this like really helps you get just a feel for, how you want the design to flow and based on what makes sense to most people. Method 2 is journey mapping. So this is where you visualize the major interactions that shape the user's experience in accomplishing a certain goal. So like what is the sequence of interactions that make up that experience, and how do they find what they're looking for? You'll see in this example, which is for like switching mobile plans, there's like 4 different stages: define, compare, negotiate, select. And each one kind of like walks you through the user's journey of what they would like be thinking about and how they're going to navigate the design. Method 3 is an information architecture. So this is kind of like a big tree, like a flow chart. It's like creating a visual representation of the product's infrastructure, features, and hierarchy. And it helps you just plan and organize the content of like a new website or app before you're wireframing it and building it. And it makes it just a lot smoother in the design process to know what you're making and like what that's going to lead to next. Any questions so far about content-driven design? Perfect. Okay, now we're gonna talk about like plain language, which is like at the heart of like accessible design, and that starts with accessible content. Um, so plain language is communication your audience can understand the first time they read or hear it. It's all about making like language just like easy and quick to digest for like the biggest group of people that you can accommodate for. So the Plain Language Initiative grew out of like a government group promoting the use of plain language in government communications to the public. And these guidelines are like universally applicable far beyond government context. So it's like a lot easier for, us who like aren't involved in government and like law making to just be able to understand like the laws and stuff like that. Design accessibility extends beyond visual elements like color contrast, and plain language is often overlooked, especially as like designers. We look at like, does this look good? Do the colors make sense? Does the hierarchy make sense? But like I think it's really, yeah, just like the language and the words we use is like really important, but it's often overlooked when like designing stuff. But it's essential in creating accessible content and designs on any kind of medium. So this is like the plain language checklist. Some of the things that they highlight in like the plainlanguage.gov is like having useful headings, organized to serve the reader's needs, uses you or other pronouns to speak to the reader, uses short sections and short sentences, omits excess words, uses concrete familiar words, and uses lists and tables to simplify complex material. So it's all just about making things concise and don't have anything that's like unnecessary or like just fluff. So plain language on the web, people are like more prone to skimming instead of like reading the whole paragraph that's there to find just like quick answers. You've probably like been on the other side of this, like you just like have a really quick question about, I don't know, something like from your homework or something, and like you have to go through so many like big articles just to find like the few like buzzwords that you're looking for. So yeah, some like tips for web plain language is like never use click here as like a link text, like the link language to describe what the link is about instead of just like click here and find out, to be like, learn more about this, or like the actual subject word. Make use of like white space so it's easy to scan and everything's like very clearly separated. Write using the same words your readers would use when doing a web search for the info. So yeah, just like use common words that people would usually search for. And don't assume your readers have knowledge of the subject or have read related pages on your site. Clearly explain things so that each page can stand on its own. Yeah, you don't want to have something on a page, but to understand that page, you have to look at other ones. Yeah. Any questions about this? Cool. I think the main idea is just like, if you were the one interacting with your design, how would it make sense to you, and how is it like easiest to interact with? All right. Now we're gonna wrap up with like talking about Figma plugins. These are kind of like Google extensions and stuff like that. So you bring in real data, customize your experiences, and create more efficient workflows using them. Yeah, so they're like little power-ups and they help extend Figma's product functionality. So just like an extension, it's kind of like anyone can make a plugin and then anyone can access them in Figma. They help with things like automating repetitive tasks, filling in real content, checking accessibility standards, and a lot more. Yeah, like I said, they're built by other Figma community members and then published on the community page. So you can even build your own from scratch and then people can use it. Yeah, so one category of plugins is like utility plugins, and these like help you organize your workspace and speed up your workflow. Some examples are like rename it, which allows you to like batch rename layers and frames. So it'll find, so like the second one, find and replace, it searches for like text you have across like your design in your file. And then say you like want to find the word sketch and everything and replace it with like Figma, then you can just like really quickly run this plugin, type in sketch, and then it'll find every place where it has sketch. Then it will just like replace it with whatever you want, like Figma or whatever. Clean document helps you organize and clean up your file. Similayer is like a select all with this property based on like wide range. And then red lines is like annotate pixel dimensions and measurements, helps you like find guidelines for that. And then there's also accessibility plugins. These help you follow like accessibility guidelines to make sure your designs are inclusive. So one thing of this is like the plain language that we talked about, or like color contrast. The plugin called Able helps you like check the color contrast ratios to simulate like color vision deficiencies. And like how that works is like you want the ratio above like 4.5 or something like that. And then that kind of gives you like the green flag that this is a good like combination of colors that people can read. Focus orderer, annotate and test designs for keyboarding and screen reader users. Colorblind helps you view your designs in 8 different types of color vision deficiencies, also helping with color. And then viewports previews designs on a variety of device sizes to ensure responsiveness, like across different devices people might have. And then there's also content plugins. So these help you quickly like populate your designs with real content, like words or pictures. And these can include like names, phone numbers, profile pictures, graphs, stuff like that. Yeah, so like Google Sheets Sync helps you sync data from a Google Sheets into your Figma file, which is very useful if you have like a long list of data. Content Reel quickly inserts text-based content into your designs. Mapsicle just like helps you paste a picture of a map. Like if you're making like a tracker app or something, then you can just like quickly get a picture of a map. Yeah. There's other stuff like charts or stock photos. But yeah, there's like a very, very large library of plugins in Figma, and it's like rapidly expanding every day. And like I highly encourage you to look at them. If you have like even just like a question of if you can do this thing in Figma, there's probably a plugin to help you do that. So yeah, you should definitely explore plugins in the community page. There's other examples like timer, blobs. It'll just make like random blob shapes. Figmotion does like animation. There's patterns, and you can also play Tetris in Figma. So fun, but yeah, the scope is very, very large. And so how you run a plugin, within your Figma file, there's like a little icon next to your text tool at the top. It has like 4 shapes next to each other. That's your resources icon. And then plugins are housed there. So you can click on that and then click on plugins. And then you can see like all the ones that you've saved, and then just like click on it to run it in your file. And yeah, some of them specify like, oh, select 2 layers to run this one or stuff like that, but it'll tell you. And yeah, a few things to keep in mind about plugins. Also, you need to run it manually. So you have to like select the things that you want it to do on your file. And they also can't perform actions in the background. So it's like a one use and it's done. It's not like continuously doing something in your file, if that makes sense. But yeah, like we mentioned before, FigJam also allows you to use plugins and widgets, which are kind of similar, but more specific to FigJam files. And you can check the community page to see like what plugins work for Figma design versus FigJam or both. And yeah, we will just wrap up this lecture talking about some announcements. So your homework 7 is like the auto layout menu. So you'll get to like pick a menu of a restaurant that you like, and then kind of just like recreate it using auto layout tools that we talked about today. And it'll just give you like some more practice learning auto layout. And yeah, it is like a tricky concept. If you don't get it at first, that's okay. You can yeah, message us on Slack or UTA too if you just need like some extra help or guidance. And then lab 7 is more practice with auto layout, doing this like fun little Flexbox Froggy game. It's like a little mini game, so it's very fun. And yeah, it's inspired by an actual like CSS practice game where you can like type in code to like get the frogs to go on their pads, but we're doing it with Autolayout. So very, very fun. And today's secret word, Lacia, would you like to choose? Okay, kangaroo is today's secret word. Good choice. And yeah, homework, readings, lab. If you can't make it to lab, please message your TA as we track attendance. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you guys for coming to lecture and have a good night. Yay.